Welcome to Left, East to West with me, Nikki Hill.
And me, Tom Parkin. Looking forward to our guest today, Nikki. Someone I think is going to defeat a conservative government and become a premier soon. And I love the part that she seems to have a plan to do it.
Yeah, and so we're excited both about the new premier potential there and to have Carla Beck join us today. So as listeners will know, Carla is the leader of the Saskatchewan NDP and the official opposition in Saskatchewan. She's been building a lot of momentum with her caucus around issues like affordability, healthcare, and energy use. So she's coming up. But first of all, we're going to go to This Week Below the Fold, tracking a couple of important issues that didn't make national headlines. Tom, you picked up in some interesting shifts in Canadian wages that was pretty low profile last week, but you tell me that it has you worried about the mood in Alberta and conservative identity.
Yeah, Nikki, for years, obviously, Alberta workers enjoyed the highest average wage of any province. And it was a magnet. The province was a magnet for workers across the country. But in 2016, the average wage, including overtime, was over $26. The next group was under $24, BC, Ontario, Quebec. So quite a large gap. But last Thursday, StatsCan released its survey of employment payroll and hours for April, and the data shows that story is over. This April, the average hourly worker in BC, Ontario, and Quebec earned between $1 and $2 more an hour than last year, than April of 2025. But in the same 12 months, the average Alberta wage just went up 11 cents. 11 cents. Alberta wage growth is stalled, and it's not just a one-year story. And over the 10 years, going back to April 2016, the average hourly wage has increased just 21% in Alberta. That's below the rate of inflation. It's now it was the lowest increase during that period of any province in Canada. During that same period, Quebec average wage up 50%, BC up 40%, Ontario up 39%. So the average Alberta wage now ranks fourth in Canada, below the national average. And this is a big change. So a falling, the thing that, is so incongruous about this is the falling average real wage comes despite Alberta oil fields production being at record levels. Not just production at record levels, but at very high prices at record levels. Right. Earlier this month, StatsCan reported 87 million barrels of crude coming from Alberta's oil fields in March, up 2% from last March, and up an amazing 43% from the March of 10 years ago. But very clearly, this money from this record-setting production at very high prices is not trickling down to Albertans. It's not even trickling down to the Albertans in the oil and gas extraction industry, where the average wage is well down over the past 12 months, according to that StatsCan survey. And just as an aside, that probably is not because individual workers' wages went down. It's probably because of a reduction in overtime and perhaps a lower employment of the highest paid skilled trades workers. But Nikki, if people want to take a look at all this raw data, the footnotes and the charts and this stuff, I posted it on my Substack. Data shows. People can go Google data shows Substack and they can look at the data. So where is Alberta's natural resource wealth going? Well, as Jim Stanford said to us last week, it doesn't take a PhD in economics to figure out it's going to the oil companies. Well, the average hourly wage increased 21% over 10 years in Alberta. Investors in Alberta's oil resources have made off like bandits. Over the same 10 years, the stock price of Canadian natural resources is up 189%, not 21%, 189. Cenovus up 96%, Tech Resources 311%, Suncor 116%, Imperial Oil 239%. And I'll bet you most of their shareholders have never even been to Alberta. The Alberta UCP has created this incredible machine for sucking wealth out of Alberta and pipelining it to investors in Toronto, in New York, in the Cayman Islands, wherever, to the global elite. But the wage data shows the UCP model does not deliver for everyday people. And it's more than that, because there's one other, I think, striking piece in the StatsCan data that goes to this. They do a quarterly Canadian social study and ask the same questions over long periods of time. Um, and over these 10 years, Albertans have gone to them from being amongst the most upbeat Canadians about their futures
Yeah.
to the absolute gloomiest.
Yeah.
The gloomiest of any province. And I worry that that is a good mood to work with if your goal is to set people against each other.
Yeah.
And I worry that it makes it a lot tougher if your goal is actually to pull people together for the project of trying to reverse this decline and restore Alberta's progress. So yeah, Nikki, I'm worried about Alberta's future. The bright,
Mm-hmm.
optimistic story that the PC's told for years and years is still being told by the UCP, but it's just stopped being true.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously a lot of people understand that, and they know they need to have a better choice in the UCP. But for others, the story of affluent Alberta conservatism is some sort of identity, not something that they kind of figure they have a choice about. So
Yeah.
it has to be true. And to displace the thought that the policy of conservative leaders have ruined that identity, people lose themselves in theories of separation or expelling immigrants or some other
Yeah.
weirdo thing that makes things worse. Think Brexit or MAGA. So for these conservative identitarians, the most difficult thing to consider is that it was the conservatives who betrayed their future. And I do find that politically concerning, not just for people in Alberta, but for our country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you say, it does set up the stage for looking elsewhere for sort of who's to blame for that. And I mean, certainly sitting here in BC, we always hear how strong wages are in Alberta. That narrative just continues over the worry. But as you say, BC seeing a lot of growth here that also doesn't get some of that credit. So changing the narratives is going to be important here.
Well, and if I could, I've said this to you, Nikki, many times. If there was something I could change about the leadership's communication of the BC government, it would be like, you guys are doing not, I wouldn't say great, but you're doing pretty good at given the times. And they need to figure a way out to talk about the idea that, BC has been a growth leader. Their wages are strong, and there's a lot of positives in BC. So,
Yeah.
you gotta sell, but you know what? You can't just make stuff up. And that's where, the UCP story has run out. Anyway,
I'm pretty sure
I,
I've amplified a few BC ministers getting out that strong GDP number this week. So I think they're
they
definitely
they did
trying.
do
They're
that. I
trying.
noticed that. So they're trying to turn the corner. It's like, gosh.
How you get it
Anyway,
out over and over.
yeah. Well, you've been thinking about the 2021 Pacific Northwest Heat Dome
Hmm.
and the slow pace of policy change to address that. Tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. It does feel so long ago now, but only
Uh,
5 years ago, late June 2021, BC did experience this unprecedented heat dome that's in our
yes.
memories now, but does feel distant as many things do, given that, we're still in pandemic times then. People have moved on or tried to move on from some of the traumatic events that were happening in this time period. But this really was one of those. We had record-breaking temperatures around the province for several days, and then 619 people died in
Hmm.
such a short period. And so I think, as we hit the 5-year anniversary, there are a number of studies and reports coming out that are telling us exactly what the impact was. But I think where we haven't necessarily seen the level of policy change, again, poly crises and governments trying to address many of them, but it was quite a remarkable period of time in terms of that impact. And it also in the past month or so, just spring in BC has been very hot. So I think
Mhm.
a lot of people are again thinking about what
Mm.
hasn't changed and what could change.
Mhm.
That what I think is important too is, it wasn't just about extreme weather. There's really about inequality here in what happened and why 619 people passed in that short period of time. It was a very severe human toll, and 98% died in their homes. So imagine that, with the
Mhm.
weather, and you're in your home and you can't deal with it. A lot of those folks being over the age of 70, about 67%, and then many living alone in lower income neighborhoods being really critical there, where there weren't resources, there weren't neighbors, they were in isolation perhaps, but also
Mhm.
emergency systems just got overwhelmed. It was a case where ambulances couldn't keep up, but it was also a case, I think, where, sort of the true scale of the crisis wasn't understood till it was over. It was
Uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
deadly days and the system couldn't respond. And then to understand exactly what happened, of course, you had to get through it.
Mhm.
But I think, what's was clear from the start is that, and there has been a lot of research that the strongest predictor of who actually died wasn't just age or health. It was that combined measure of poverty and social isolation. So here you have survival and during extreme heat or extreme
Yep.
crisis, deeply tied to income, the type of housing they're in, and that social connection to make sure that people were okay in that time. So it's like the unanticipated disaster. I actually remember it really clearly for different reasons. It was our moving day. So we were in the middle of
Perfect.
moving. And so
Yeah.
there was only an inkling that it was going to get hot. So, we knew to take care of basic precautions. We had senior animals. We were, trying to take care of poor movers and friends, keep them hydrated. But I even think I can think so clearly about the moment of finding out after how severe it had been as you're just getting through it with the resources to do so. And really, I think even in government's been quite honest, and former Premier John Horgan spoke a fair bit about this. Like, you can only take the weather reports were and somewhat delayed. The preparation ahead of time wasn't there. And again, going back to the last month or so in BC where we're having these spikes in heat, how you look at policy change in the future is really important. And it's also a time where something that has hit the national radar, which was the destruction of an entire town, Lytton, completely lost to a wildfire in the
Right.
same time period,
Yes.
was in this zone as well. And all the aftermath of what is a pretty significant monumental change here in terms of losing 90% of a town itself. I think the interesting thing, though, too, and there's been new studies, is that haven't really been leveled up unless, but is it wasn't just human costs. So it actually reshaped in the few days ecosystems around the province. There was, marine life that has died in massive numbers,
Mhm.
complete, like 92% of a species of mussels wiped out, and, things that are all needed within their ecosystems. And so about 3/4 of species, if we think about a 3 or 4 day period, negatively affected, even down to trees still feeling, as we have forestry industry crisis and looking at the trade implications and impacts on communities, there actually was a really big impact from 2021 on trees and forests around the province as well that has to be calculated in here. So
Mhm.
I think the big thing has people are looking at now is like we hit the 5-year mark. We know that these clear takeaways are it's not one-off events. We're looking at Europe right now and the level of heat waves that they're going through. People in the UK just really similarly not being prepared in their homes for the sort of heat that they're facing right now, and this ongoing threat here. But also, of course, we're seeing the increase in affordability challenges, housing crisis, and then growing social isolation since the pandemic that is going to continue to put vulnerable people at risk and needs to have that full policy initiative. So there has been movement. I think we have to give provincial, federal, and municipal governments credit here for seeing. I've certainly seen as we hit the 5-year anniversary, municipalities talking about the changes they've tried to make. On a recent show, we were talking to Shauna Sylvester about the Keep It
Mhm.
Cool initiative, which is an important one to try to very well coordinated, supported to transition those low-rise apartments to a heat pump use. So could make a huge difference here for some of the people that we were talking about who could be vulnerable. And then we've also seen, policy response evolve in change for Lytton itself, particularly around seeing new legislation to figure out how to collaborate better and faster with Indigenous communities, which was significantly part of Lytton and the region, or Indigenous communities' response. And then how small communities need to be able to have the systems to support their own recovery. And Lytton, I think is very clear where that recovery isn't complete yet. 5 years later, there's a lot of work still there to do. There was another fire in the region recently, just ongoing tragedy for an entire population there in a community. But we are, I think the other thing that we've seen in terms of policies that haven't been changed is BC Policy Solutions. Friends, we've had Ignova on our show early on. They released a paper calling for updated heat exposure regulations to better protect workers that have been advocated on for a while. So those are, proactive changes that need to happen. But I think, we need to keep coming back to that core lesson here is that extreme heat, it isn't just an environmental issue. It isn't just a climate change issue. It really is a social issue. And we need to ensure that people can stay in place and stay cool no matter what their income, age, housing, and that policy change needs to be coordinated across all levels of government. And we're going to see, and I think we're a lot of concern right now with the heat spiking that we might see some of these repeat patterns from 2021 again.
Sure. Yeah. These things seem to be happening more and more.
Yeah.
Nikki, the 691 people died, I think you said. So is this mostly like just a case of people being in their houses and dehydrating and being just too hot and nobody checking on them?
Yeah, and the state of
Is
their
that
buildings being too hot and
no air?
and they're
Yeah,
and
no air
and
conditioning.
yeah, emergency response not being able to respond. But also I think I was
Mm,
reading something else that like the space of time in which it took people to die was very short.
uh,
So and then the emergency response wasn't able to get there in time because they were overwhelmed, or if they're isolated, nobody knows that they're overwhelmed. I think the other piece here is that there's still not as much of a proactive preparation. I've talked to advocates in the downtown east side
yeah.
who can't get, in advance. It's almost like before the crisis happens, trying to get water and air conditioning and fans and things to people is not the priority in funding. So it is really, in many ways, still kind of retroactive or in the space of responding, but when everybody else is trying to get access to water and fans and all of the things you need.
Yeah, yeah. Which is why you're supposed to, I mean, why we need emergency management plans for these kind of things. So you can kind of go, okay,
Yeah.
we have this plan written down. Let's activate it right now because we
Yeah.
don't have time to think about what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. And the right tools, right?
We should have been planning that a long time ago and made
Yeah.
sure that the proper authorities have the proper powers to make things move fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, that's
And that's
so
what we're seeing
tragic.
in UK and
Yeah.
Europe too right now, right? Where,
Yes.
there's not, fans are not necessarily the tool that you need for safety. Like there's also
Mm.
massive incidents going on if you don't have that air conditioning or the heat pump. So it is, you look across jurisdictions, the solutions seem like they're there. It's just getting them implemented.
Yeah, it's putting it together.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, words, were something to think about as we head into summer. Just
Yeah.
uplifting, Nikki. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I know
Uh, well, but let's take a quick break. Something a
there's
little
your
bit more up.
downer of the week.
Yeah, that was
Yes.
the downer. But something a little more uplifting is we're going to talk with Carla Beck now, and she's got a plan about how she's going to win this election. She's going to get rid of Scott Moe, and she has a plan to govern the province, which is something she's cooked up 2 years in advance, is already talking to people. So I'm kind of inspired to talk to her about that. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with her. Welcome to Left, East, West. Carla Beck, great to have you here.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. Now, you grew up in the Weyburn area, famous for, as famous as the riding of another NDP leader, Tommy Douglas, went to University in Regina, graduated in social work, and did that for about 20 years before the thought of running and winning in Regina and Lakeview. 2016, you won. 2022, reelected, became the Sask NDP leader in 2024. And in that election, delivered a bit of a wake-up notice to Scott Moe, picking up 13 seats for the NDP. And I remember that opening ad that you did in that campaign where you were there as a baseball player, And I thought that was very clever, actually, because it tied into something personal. It also suggested that you were maybe had your eye on the ball and we're going to score some runs for Saskatchewan. A lot of different things people can read into it, but that's kind of true, right? You do have a can you tell us about your passion for
Yeah.
baseball?
Well, we took a bit of a swing with that ad, if you'll pardon the pun.
So to say.
Yeah, baseball. So my family, I grew up in Lang, about halfway between Regina and Weyburn,
Oh,
obviously
okay.
where Tommy Douglas first served, and baseball was a huge part of growing up. Town of 200, we had a senior ball team. I don't know if you can see my brothers and my dad back here behind me in their Lang Angels ball uniforms. It was a big part of growing up. Sports days, ball diamonds. My my dad and my grandpa are both in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and the Beck family is in the
Really?
Hall of Fame. So I am
Nice.
in the Hall of Fame, in the Saskatchewan Baseball Hall of Fame. I would love to tell you it's because I was such a great player. I could hit. I'm a pretty good scorekeeper, but we've got more talented people in the family than I was. But I could hit a ball. But at 50, whatever it was when we did that ad, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to hit it. So we had some coaching before and took some practice swings.
Nice.
I said, if it's bad, my brother's going to be the first to tell me. And sure enough, when the ad hit, I got the first message was, "Hey, great ad." The second was my brother. Well, hey, I saw your ad. I could have given you some tips.
Oh, that's
Oh,
yeah, that's a little.
brothers.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but baseball's been great to us. Got a couple of nephews that are playing college ball in the U.S., one who's draft eligible this year.
Oh, cool.
Pretty excited about that. Coached my kids in ball and t-ball. What's not to love about baseball?
That's
There you go.
great. And memorable campaign ads. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
Yeah, and the ad worked. You know, it was
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I said, just don't let me look ridiculous out there. They won awards with it, and really what we needed to do was introduce me in a way that we didn't have a lot of time. I had just
Yeah.
become
Yep.
leader in 2022, so
Yep.
we didn't have a lot of time, and it hit the mark. And
It,
it's one of the things I get asked about quite a lot, especially when I'm down east,
really.
honestly, about that
Oh,
ad.
that's
Yeah.
great.
Well,
Yeah.
Nice.
it was different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this is not just another political ad by another politician. It was different. So it kind of stood out. And I thought that was interesting.
It was
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of fun.
great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
human. Okay. And so now bringing back in the human as well will be big in the pre-election period. So you got your focus on election expected in October next year and need to win four or so more ridings for Moe's Saskatchewan party to take the majority. So obviously we're seeing Moe have some problems here, particularly around some of the issues you've been working on, like powering the electricity grid. And there have been some leaks about big costs. Can you tell us a bit more
Mhm.
about that?
Yeah, so we are about 850 days ahead of the next provincial election. Um, but this team hasn't stopped working really since that election where we came so close. One of the things that people will tell you in politics, I think you've probably heard this many times, is you'll know when you're getting closer. There'll be signs. One of them is people start sending you leaks, manila envelopes,
Yeah.
obviously, how people usually describe them, but
Yeah.
these days they come electronically. Um, we had right after the election, the Sask Party had really a surprise announcement that I don't think anyone or very few people saw coming, which was to diverge from the plan that the country had coming out of Stephen Harper's government, that we were going to transition off of coal.
Mm.
Right after the election, January 2025, the minister stood in the power plant in Estevan and suggested, no, we're going to burn coal forever. Very different time. It was a shock to everyone, I think, including some people at SaskPower. And we received a leak document. Someone took a hell of a risk, honestly, to send this to us because they felt that strongly about what the path that the government was going down. At that point, the government was suggesting that this was going to cost $900 million.
Yeah.
I think there were skeptics about that, but they're not the most transparent government, so that we were going with their numbers. The true cost in that briefing document that was leaked to us is $26 billion. So just for context, in Saskatchewan, the whole of the provincial budget right now is just over $22 billion.
Oh,
The
goodness.
debt from 1905 until now, over 90% of that from conservative governments, but it stands, the total debt of the province is $43 billion.
Yeah.
$26 billion on
26.
one plan.
Yeah.
Refurbish coal. That is not a whole plan for energy generation into the future, or that is to refurbish the coal plant, for fuel for that coal plant, and a little bit for transmission.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we have a huge contrast between the plan of the current government and our plan, which we just happen to have been working on for the last year, which is our grid and growth plan. So this, I think, was extraordinary for a few reasons. One of them being the cost of this refurbishment. The other is that people in this province, I think, are signaling every day that they're looking for change, and that people are starting to speak out about that.
Yeah, and you actually put out your own economic plan called the Grid and Growth Plan before this all started to become public, correct?
Well, we were working on it. There's a few lines that intersect here, but we'd been talking about this for some time. Certainly after the last election, we were talking about honestly some of the polarization that exists within the energy generation and environmental space, that it's really, really difficult to make the decisions that need to be made today in this hyper polarized, this very heated environment. And we knew that we needed a plan here in Saskatchewan for energy generation, not just for today, but into the future. If you'll indulge me, a Greek proverb, my maiden speech was based around the Greek proverb that societies grow great when old men and women plant trees under whose shade they shall never sit. And we knew that a lot of decisions, a lot of that planning, that planting, if you will, in this province that we saw with previous governments here, wasn't happening under the Sask party. That there were a lot of decisions that needed to be made at SaskPower about refurbishment of the grid, about how we're going to generate energy or electricity in this province. The plan, what was actually the plan to get off coal when we assumed that they had one up until last January. And we really, and Alina will describe it this way, our shadow minister for SaskPower, she engaged with one of the top companies, one of the top modelers in the country, to run some scenarios. I think about dozen different scenarios, with really the only guardrail being that we didn't want to be a net importer of power. We wanted to be self-reliant when it came to power. And basically from there, I say, it was a leap of faith. She said it was a Jesus take the wheel moment, and we let the model. So they ran all of the models based on the government's own public-facing numbers. Again, at that point, it was $900 million, which we know has been rather inflated since then. And it could have come back that keeping coal, burning coal was going to be the cheapest option. That was a risk that we ran. It wasn't something that we thought necessarily we should be doing, or, but we let the model take, we let the modelers do their work. And what came back was that even at that $900 million mark, the government's plan was going to be double. The other scenarios that were there would double people's power rates. So if you're looking at this from an emissions standpoint, if you're looking at this from a cost standpoint, which really was what we were looking at, what is the best path to affordable power in this province, predictable power in this province? Theirs was the most expensive plan, even before the $26 billion. So what we,
Is the
sorry,
sorry.
so we presented 4 scenarios basically that would eventually get us off coal, although we still are
Okay.
running those assets to end of life. We don't have an option. We
Right.
the work between here and there has not been done in this province, and a huge increase in renewables, things like battery storage,
Hmm.
and we're going to need natural gas to build
Right.
out natural gas for some of that transition eventually with a path to nuclear. So that
Interesting.
was our plan that came out this spring,
Mhm.
and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it a little more.
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to ask you though, there's a lot of focus in the plan on the grid, on producing electricity
Hmm.
that residents of the province need. What about the
Hmm.
broader economy or the broader vision
Yeah,
that you've put in that plan? Can you just tell us a
yeah,
little bit about that?
absolutely. You know, we really yeah, there aren't a lot of things that I'll say that the premier and I agree on any given day, but this is one place we do agree. Saskatchewan is sitting on a pile of opportunity. We
Right.
really do have what the world needs right now. If you're looking at critical minerals, if you're looking at uranium, if you're looking at feeding the world, all of those things, there's an incredible amount of opportunity here in Saskatchewan. One of the things that is really going to be needed to unlock that potential is going to be reliable, affordable power. All of those things that I've described um, are not going to be possible without having that predictable power.
Hmm.
And you know, along earlier this spring as well, the government did announced 2 increases for power in the province. And, another one of those signs, there was a letter to the rate review panel that came from some of the biggest energy, users in our province, some of the biggest businesses in our province, saying that not only was this, um, lack of notice when it came to rate increases, going to impact their businesses, existing businesses in the province, that this was going to potentially impact the ability to attract more business, more
Right.
investment to our province. And that is certainly what we've heard.
Hmm.
Mhm.
We've been at conferences around the province, but also uh, outside of the country, and
Hmm.
in other provinces. Um, the unpredictability in that power generation space has been a bit of a hindrance,
Yeah.
and so that is part of what we were doing with this model. The other thing, on the other side, perhaps, or also part of this plan was um, the need to get this plan out early to start building trust with the public, with stakeholders, and I will say for even with our doubled numbers, for an opposition party, I think 900 days ahead of the next provincial election to do something like this,
Hmm.
um,
Mhm.
we haven't hidden it. It is available gridandgrowth.ca. We've invited input with stakeholders, with municipal groups, with farm groups, with industry,
Hmm.
chambers of commerce, labor. We've provided technical briefings. And um, I think this is how we rebuild trust in this space. The decisions that we're going to
Hmm.
make with our power grid are going to outlive all of us.
Right.
There will be none of us left, when we see the end of some of these decisions.
Yeah.
And I think the people of this province, I trust the people of this province to look at our plan, to be able to kick the tires on it, to look under the hood, if you will, and we're really proud of it.
Yeah.
And potentially, there may be things that we've missed. We're 900 days almost ahead of an election. We've got opportunity to make the plan better.
Hmm.
And I would contrast that with the
Mhm.
current government's plan, um, that was announced just a few months after an election in which they didn't speak of this at all, their coal refurbishment plan. Some of the indications from the leaked documents are that they've been working on this for some time. So we have a secretive, very expensive plan to
Hmm.
refurbish coal in this province, and we have a grid and growth plan that lays out for the people of this province exactly what a Saskatchewan NDP government would do in this space. Um,
Mhm.
I would say it's not only the product, but it's the process
Yeah.
that is showing the people of this province they have a choice.
Yeah, let's dig into the process a bit. So, I mean, there is it sometimes benefit to being in opposition. I worked for the BC NDP both through government and opposition days, but I think there was an ability there in the opposition days to have this sort of widespread consultation process as well
Mhm.
before elections where you're going to be competitive to get that level. So, how did you actually engage MLAs, party stakeholders in this process of building a plan like this? You spoke to
Mhm.
other stakeholder groups too that you brought in.
We did. We had folks who had worked rather recently, in some cases, with SaskPower. We had industry experts. We had folks who were active in the environmental space. We worked with labor groups. We weren't exclusive in terms of who
Hmm.
we invited in. Once we had the modeling, once we had sort of a sense of where the plan was going, we continued to invite in stakeholders and refine what we eventually released this earlier this spring.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
as I said, it's not just here's the plan and go out and sell the plant. It's been a continued process.
That's great.
Technical briefings with stakeholders, town halls, um, meetings with various stakeholder groups, again,
Hmm.
labor groups, and inviting people to look at it and explicitly saying if there are things that you think we missed or things that
Yeah.
we've gotten wrong, um, let us know. It's a refinement process at this point. Um, I'm not sure if others have done it like this, but as I said, I think this is too important. I want
Yeah.
to have a wide consensus, wide buy-in by the
Hmm.
time of the next election, so that we can actually implement the things that
Hmm.
we're talking about. And it's not, written growth is one of them. We're also taking on a little project around Your Care, Your Say, which is, rebuilding healthcare, which
Right.
is a small
Right.
project.
Small
This
Yeah.
is
project. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, small project.
No
Uh,
problems for anyone there. Yeah.
that's right. And I as I said, with that project as well, we just um released the first interim report.
Right.
Um I have come away from all of these meetings um being more confident than ever that we do have a bright future here in Saskatchewan, that
Hmm.
Saskatchewan people are still the people that I remember growing up with, that care about their neighbors, that
Yeah.
want to look long term, that are willing to, look at what needs to be done and dig in and get her done. Um, it has been it's been an incredible process, and
Right.
for a long time, I think a lot of people didn't feel like there was a choice. That maybe things were bad, but this is how it had to be. Um, I think we're showing people that they have a choice, and they not only do they deserve better, but better is on offer. So
Yeah.
that's really the
Hmm.
project for the that and a few other things that we're doing over the next number of
Yeah.
Yeah. It
weeks.
sounds like both
Well,
choice and voice you're trying to give people too.
Choice and voice, yeah, and
Yeah.
also a sense that I'll speak personally. I don't think I'm the only one who feels like this. The kind of divisive politics that we've seen, particularly
Yeah.
post 2020,
Yeah.
I don't think it's getting us to great places. I
no.
don't like that. You've got families who can't have a civil discussion sometimes around the
Hmm.
dinner table
Yeah.
if certain topics come up. That's not We've always had differences of opinion here in Saskatchewan, I think in other places as well. Um, I think that there's a way to do this differently, and that's what
Hmm.
we're showing people. There is a path forward that addresses the issues that most people care about, and delivers better results for Saskatchewan people. So,
Mm.
and we've got a team that works incredibly hard,
Yeah.
which helps a lot.
Yeah. So one of the things I think that's interesting about the process that you're taking on here is
Mhm.
it shows some faith in the voters and in the people of the province,
Yeah,
which is kind of showing a vulnerability in a way, but it's also showing your trust in them, which can be
yeah.
reciprocated to you.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of an interesting uh, fusion of policy generation and stakeholder management,
Mm.
or just good politics, coalition building, however you want to look at it. It's kind of
Mm.
it's kind of both at once. It's a building process, which I think is, you know, I think it's a very interesting way to go about things. And I remember you've got this thing out early, and I remember way back when Mike Harris came to run Ontario, he got out there really early with a plan. That was obviously nothing like your plan. It ended up being a real disaster for our province. But the
Mm,
benefit of having the plan out early was that his candidates knew the lines, they knew what the policy was. The
mhm.
party members could read it, they could debate it, they understood what the party was trying to do, the PC Party of Ontario. And so this plan, for you guys, becomes a path forward that clarifies what you're about. Like, it shows that you're serious about governing and you're serious about being a competitive force in the elections whenever they come. Um, but the key there is, I think, like, how do we make what is your thinking about how to use this as a tool for letting more people know about what is your direction for the
Yeah,
province?
yeah. A few things there, and I'm a bit tickled that you saw that there, because that certainly is part of what we're doing here, and it is a vulnerability. We're taking, as I mentioned, Alina talks about this grid and growth plan as a bit of a Jesus take the wheel moment. It could have gone differently,
Right.
and we are. Making ourselves vulnerable and putting this out ahead of time, allowing, the other side to, um, say what they're going to say
Yeah.
about it.
Sure, they're going to take whacks at it too.
It's made a bit easier when their plan is revealed to,
Yeah.
have to come
Yeah.
across that
Massive
it
vulnerabilities, yes.
Yeah, they may
um,
not want to poke too much. Yeah, that's a good point.
but it really is rooted in a deep love and belief in the people of this province, that they are reasonable people who can, when presented with reasonable things,
Right.
will make reasonable choices. Really, really, that's it.
Mhm.
And I
Mm.
I am very happy to tell you that that vulnerability has been rewarded time and time again when we've been out meeting with people across this province, whether that's on this issue or that is talking about healthcare. Um, the biggest thing we had going against us, frankly, that I could feel in the last election, that people knew things were bad. People had a lot of concerns, but they weren't sure about us. They
Hmm.
weren't sure what we were going to do. And
Yeah.
what they did know about us often was the result of 20 years of rather effective messaging by the Sask Party, if I'm being very frank
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
that.
sure.
We need to tell our own story. We needed to build trust, and we needed to do that quickly. Um, the first thing we started saying as a whole team, we've got to say the same thing in every room. This
Mhm.
province is too small. People are already too likely to be distrustful of politicians. Um, let's just say this, and even when you're not going to make everyone happy, you've got
Yeah.
to say the same thing in every room. Um, I don't fear debate. I like debate. I grew up, in a big family, around a lot of baseball and hockey players. I like a good dust up. All of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
I fear apathy. That's what I fear.
Mm.
When I'm talking to people on the doorstep, if they want to argue, we can win most of those fights, or at least have a good time doing that. I
Mhm.
fear when people say you're all the same,
Yeah.
or it
Mm.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's not true. And so that's really what this project has been about. And as I said, it has been rewarded in many, many ways. I can't believe I get to do what I get to do most days.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit, obviously right now and probably in the last 18 months more than ever, that the provincial federal integration is so important. So what is the federal role that you're seeing here in terms of policy funding levers you need pushed in Ottawa
Mhm.
to make a Saskatchewan plan more successful? And in the context of, seeing where we're on the cusp here in BC of the major projects agreement, it looks like, between BC and the federal government. We've got Alberta's next steps coming out. Where do you see the federal Saskatchewan rule?
Yeah, there are a few places for sure that we could, and I think would be really, really helpful for some federal investment here. One of the things that I think most relevant to the grid and growth plan are interties.
Mm.
Making sure that we've got an electricity generation and transmission system that's going to work east to west and to the north.
Yeah.
A lot of what we would be looking to develop here. A lot of the deposits in this province are north, and I know that's the case up into the territories. We've seen some movement around the Port of Churchill. I think those intertie pieces would be an important part of this transmission infrastructure. And then, as we move out to in the nuclear space, I think that is a place where you would need to see federal investment. I know there have been some announcements recently. I think that's important, especially if you're looking at. I mean, I think at this point everything is on the table. Everything from full scale, like a CANDU reactor, which
Yeah.
definitely would need a larger role for the federal government. To SMRs, where the federal government is putting a lot of time and attention right now.
Mhm.
But again, that's down the path into the future when those things become viable and economical to bring online.
Mhm.
The other piece that's huge, one of the things when we're talking to people about how much we need to build, not only in this province but in the country, um, I think that there are a lot of head nods. Everyone agrees. Yes, we need to be building. Yes, this is the moment. We've learned our lesson. We need to make sure we're diversifying and moving east west. Um, but the quiet thing that people will often say as well is, who the hell is going to build it?
Mm.
Labor force piece.
Yeah.
We need a real strategy to skill up workers right across this
Mhm.
sector, skilled workers. You know, Folks who are going to be working in this space. Need training. You need to be ensuring that you're bringing people to be able to take on these jobs. And
Mhm.
I do think there will be um, a lot of opportunity here in the short term and the long term in Saskatchewan, but we need to make sure that we're putting some time and attention into skills training.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So those would be a few places.
Yeah.
I'm sure Lena would have a whole list of other things as well, but there 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 are a few places there that we'd love to see
Yeah.
some federal investment.
Okay. And on the ground, you are really, the last election you drew so close
Hmm.
to Moe, to Scott Moe's SAS party. Didn't quite make it. Is it 4 seats difference? You need to gain 4 seats to become a majority? But
Four seats, 1,600 votes. Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
But
No one's
who's
counting.
count? Yeah, no one's counting. So it's obviously very tight. And
Mhm,
if you take a look at the map, I'm not going to press you on it any
mhm,
particulars, but you take a look at the map, you can say, well, geez, we just need a few more seats to become a majority NDP government in Saskatchewan again.
mhm.
Put Carla Beck in the executive council office, make her the premier of a province. That sounds like a pretty good thing, but there's these voters. So what do you know about the swing voters in those key seats? What do they want for themselves? What do they want for the province? What kind of change are they looking for? What if you were
Yeah,
speaking that directly to that target group?
yeah.
What would be your pitch?
You know, one of the things that we noted ahead of the last election was, despite, some obvious differences, a lot's made, not just here in Saskatchewan, but an urban-rural divide,
Hmm.
north-south divide, all of these
Mm.
divisions, that when you got out and talked to people, and this was present in polling, but also, more importantly, especially with small sample size in some of these communities, doorstep to doorstep, the top issues really were the top issues, no matter where you were in the province.
Right.
Maybe how they were talked about, or the local flavor was a bit different. Um,
Mhm.
but the cost of living is the number one issue in this province, continues to
Yeah.
be. We have the highest rates of financial anxiety anywhere in the country right now. Between 4 and 5 times the rate of mortgages and arrears, for example. So cost of living is an issue right across the province. Adjacent to that, of course, is jobs and economy. People
Mhm.
are they don't just feel like they're
Yeah.
working harder and harder and falling further and further
Yeah.
behind. They really are. That purchasing power. We
Mhm.
the amount of people that we've talked to who have worked their whole lives, who've never really had to worry about taking a calculator to the grocery store, find
Mhm.
themselves putting items back, or
Mhm.
Yeah.
getting emotional about talking
Yeah.
about buying groceries, or not being able to put their kids in hockey or dance, take a little vacation. That's real
Mhm.
and is
Yeah.
borne out, as I said, both in polling, but in so many conversations. Healthcare is a huge issue.
Mhm.
Mhm.
We have the lowest rate of people who have access to primary care, which really is the basis of the whole system. And we have emergency rooms in rural Saskatchewan that are closing without warning in many cases because of
Yes.
lack of staff.
I've
Mhm.
heard
Something
those
that's
stories, yeah.
and it's
Bad.
dangerous. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even in some cases, I know of 2 for sure, where people would be directed by a piece of paper at the ER door to another emergency room, only to find that emergency room is also closed.
Right.
Yeah.
These are dangerous situations, and they affect voters here in Regina Lakeview that I represent. They affect voters home, just south of here. They affect voters right across the province. Um, and the issues around crime and community safety are increasing in our province as well. So having being able to answer to um, all of those issues and have something on offer for people, I think is incredibly important.
Mhm.
But the other observation I'll make, and especially when I became leader, I really, really had a sense that we had to get into a lot of places that we hadn't been for a long time, and
Mhm.
start telling our own story. Um, Even if we had objectively, if it existed objectively, the best plan, the plan that would fix healthcare, the plan that would do all of these things. Um, if people don't know you, if they don't trust you, if they don't think, most importantly, you care about them, it doesn't matter what's in that platform. It doesn't matter what's there. You have to get out there. You have to meet with people. You have to
Mhm.
um, be able to form a little bit of trust, and especially in a place as relational as Saskatchewan and rural Saskatchewan in particular, before you can start talking about some of the ideas and policies. So
Yeah.
that's really been the process. I say to people, if we had 20 minutes with everyone in the province, I am confident we would win.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
I've got some math geeks on my team. We did the math
Yes.
at 1.2 million. We can't do it, but
Yeah.
we've been working really hard to go out and build that trust, community by community,
Yeah.
and talk about the things that they care about. So really, it's it's not fancy. It's a lot of work, um, but that's how we've gone about it.
Yeah. So I always think of John Horgan sort of used to have something along the lines of, I can't remember the exact quote, even though we said it all the time, was along the lines, there's a lot of new Democrats in DC, they just don't know it yet, right? So it's that
Exactly.
Yeah.
time to have conversations would be amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, let's just into those things that are heating up as well nationally. So watching Scott Moe there take a step back from his support for Danielle Smith and Alberta separatists. What do you think? Is this a matter of conviction, strategy? What do you think about where that relationship's at and what it means for the province right now?
Yeah. I've been asked this question a couple of times in terms of the relationship between Scott Moe and Danielle Smith. Certainly we have watched often in horror at different times. This Moe and his government followed suit. Whether that was the Sask First Act or uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
discriminatory bills against kids
Yeah.
in schools. Trans kids in
Yeah.
particular, but the list goes on and on and on. The use of the notwithstanding clause, like
Yeah.
it was
Mhm.
meant to be sprinkled everywhere. That has been the relationship that we've seen between the two of them. Um, he's been quieter, perhaps in terms of his support. Um, I do think he needs to be showing more leadership than what we're seeing right now. I don't know that it's enough to just be silent when
Mm.
it comes to issues like this, like
Yeah.
separation. I think it's important to talk about what the consequences would be of this.
Right.
He's been really tepid on his response.
Yeah.
Suggesting that he was not going to tell Albertans what to do,
Mhm.
or that he would follow the process. There's this is I understand there's a way to talk about this that is not going to inflame, but going to um, invite people to understand what the consequences are of separation. I understand that there are some very real grievances here, as there are in Alberta with, and frustrations, longstanding frustrations with the federal government. All of that is the case. But
Mhm.
as a leader who says that he wants to keep the country together, I think he needs to step up and he needs to be a little more explicit about that
Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
in a way that's effective.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not going to give him, and I certainly don't give Premier Smith a pass either. When it's suggested, well, she has to do this or he has to do this or his base will
Mhm.
be angry. Well,
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to say what the right thing is. I think this is one of those occasions. I think the stakes are too high for him to, be sort of silent in his support or
Mhm.
his want to keep the country together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Carla, this is just my own personal observation, but I've
Mhm.
always found that people from Saskatchewan are, I think, feel very deeply about their Canadian connection.
Yeah,
And a lot of Albertans do too. And it'd just be such a shame
yeah,
if people started turning their back on that. It would just be crushing, I think, for this country.
yeah.
So, anyway,
And I
thank
mean,
you.
there are
Yes.
some loud voices
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that and I get it. However, I think that's where leadership has to come in. If there's a silent majority out there,
Yeah.
I think people need to be
Right.
organizing. I think they need to be effective. The comparison that comes up all the time is Brexit. Where people woke
Mhm.
up and realized,
Mhm.
oh shoot, what have we
Yeah.
done now?
Exactly.
I don't want to be in that situation here.
No.
Yeah.
This is,
Let's.
you know, we know that even talk of separation, and certainly we've heard that from industry, from here and in Alberta, um, is putting a bit of a damper on
Yeah.
investment. Predictable.
Yeah.
Back to the fundamentals of our good and growth plan. We need
Mhm.
Right.
predictability. We need a long term view.
Certainty. Yeah.
This is not helping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's time to speak out about those things. I think I will give that there is a way to do this that doesn't inflame and um, add fuel to the fire. Um, but it's the time to talk about exactly what's at stake and
Mhm.
Yeah.
um, not be too cute about that. So again,
Yeah.
I
Super.
understand that there's a sense that maybe they've separated paths a little bit. Um, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more clarity and
Right.
him take a stronger role.
Mhm.
Right. Well, Carla, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you have a convention this fall,
We
and and
do.
then
We do.
and then I guess actually your election is 2028, right?
2028. Yes, we have.
2028, not
Yours. Yeah.
next year, but the year following. So you've
Yeah.
got two conventions. You're really ahead of the ball. So that's good. Good for you of having your plan in place so early and getting out there and doing this
Yeah.
work. I hope we can have the chance to check in again
I hope so
before
too.
voters go to the polls. Yeah,
And certainly, if you ever find yourself this way, come stop in.
Yeah. I love
will
that.
do.
Thanks
All
so
Okay.
right.
much.
Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Mm.
Wonderful to
Thanks,
talk to you
Carla.
both. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with Love It or Heat It.
Before we wrap up, we've come to the part of the show that we like to call Love It or Heave It, about something one of us loves and wants to keep, and often something we want to heave and forever forget. So, what do you have this week, Tom?
Well, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a, semi rant, I guess. I'm asking people to please stop myth busting. Okay.
Mm,
Today, there's more myth masquerading as fact than, we've ever had. And a lot of it is pretty vile and pretty socially corrosive.
mm.
And obviously, we need to fight it. I was on a union's webpage the other day, and that's when I I lost it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to rant about this for a sec. And they had the 10 myths about unions on one of their pages. I know it was well intended. But the bold headlines of the pieces succinctly stated the 10 arguments why unions are bad, and then in small text underneath it, rather long, were the explanations of why those statements were
Mm,
incorrect. Now, I know unions want to train their activists and staff to respond to anti-union attacks, and they create these myth-busting tools. But honestly, my opinion is, for what it's worth, don't. There's something better you can do. And something that always left an impression on me was a kind of classic book that was written by an American communications theorist, George Lakoff. And he talked
Mhm.
about this problem that the humans are not strictly rational. We think about topics in implicit association with other thoughts. So this idea that a thought is framed by other thoughts, and that's what gives it meaning. So anytime you repeat a topic within that existing frame, such as when you're
Yeah.
myth busting, it actually kind of
Reinforce.
reactivates
Yeah.
that bad framing and reinforces in your mind the existing meaning, even when it's done as rebuttal, even when it's intended to change people's minds. So, my plea would be, it is okay to say, I don't see it that way, and then move on to how you do see it. That is a completely normal thing to do, especially when rebutting gets you nowhere, or worse, it strengthens the opinion that you oppose. And, if we are activists in a movement, it is literally our job to change hearts and minds. So please, let's lead by putting out our goals in positive frames, and we could just heave rebutting the nasty things that some nasty person said about us.
Okay, taken.
All right. How about you, Nikki? What's on your mind this week?
Well, I want to give a lot of credit right at the top to Comox First Nation Chief Councillor Nicole Rempel, who publicly called out federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre after his recent visit to BC. We've seen Poilievre a lot here in BC, coincidentally lately, so I wonder what's going on right now. We did touch on this a little bit on the last show. We were actually recording while Poilievre was starting a press conference on private property rights here in BC, and that really fits into a broader pattern we've seen and we're talking about on the show, which is leaning hard in those divisive narratives, similar to what we're seeing from the BC Conservatives as well, and what we're seeing when Poilievre keeps landing in our province and driving some of the same messages as we see his polling concerns continue. So Poilievre held a press conference saying he and other Conservative MPs, so speaking for his caucus, would oppose the ratification of the Comox First Nations Treaty. So it's a treaty that's already just moved through the BC legislature this spring, received royal assent in BC before the session wrapped up in May. So now this process, it moves to the federal stage, gets ratified by Parliament, receives federal royal assent, and then Comox First Nation, BC, and Canada are going to work together, or would work together, to get an effective date and move towards implementation in the treaty process. And when that's done, because of BC's lack of treaties, Comox will actually just become the 9th modern treaty nation in BC. So, we've got some work here to do still. But it also feels like Poilievre's continuing to use reconciliation and DRIPA, similarly we've seen through the BC Conservative leadership race and following, as harder for himself, a bigger push to get some polling traction here. So coming back into BC, amplifying issues in a way that we all know is fueling anti-Indigenous sentiment in communities and concerning voters on issues like private property rights, which are spreading some of that disinformation. So I think that is really what made Chief Councillor Rempel's response so important. She pointed out that Poilievre hadn't even reached out to the Comox First Nations and said directly he was stoking fear and racism. And she also said, which I think really lands, that if he had taken the time to actually read the treaty instead of relying on talking points, he would have had a much better understanding of what it means. So I think, that clarity, that willingness to push back publicly is powerful, and I appreciate seeing it. But at the same time, I hate that First Nations leaders are still having to do this work over and over again. So I guess my credit to Chief Councillor Rempel was a little bit of a love, but my hate is the work that we are making Indigenous leaders do to fight political disinformation.
I'm going to go directly against what I just said and just think, like, Poilievre is a nut. Okay, positive framing, Tom. Positive framing is, people who are trying to negotiate a treaty are trying to create the opportunity to move ahead together and to have stability. Like, is that just not obvious, the way that things have to go? I don't understand Pierre Poilievre.
Negotiations,
How is he going to go anywhere trying to just throw chaos? Jesus. Anyway, well, that's frustrating to hear that he's going to oppose the ratification. That is kind of shameful. Anyway, more fun. You've heard from me and Nikki. What about you? You can email us at lefteastwest@gmail.com and tell us about something you're loving or heaving. And also, we'd love it if you would tap the follow button on your podcast player and get reminders of upcoming interviews. We got Marstell's coming up, leader of the Ontario NDP, Jared Walker from the Canadians for Tax Fairness, and somebody we just booked this last week, B. Brusk, the president of the Canadian Labour Congress, coming up in the next few weeks. So thank you for joining. Got a lot of interesting people to come. And Nikki, have a great week.
You too. And we're having a break week as well. So
have a great 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks because it's vacation time.
Right. Well, enjoy your vacation, Nikki.
Thank you. And Doug too.
Okay. Yeah. See you guys.
Thanks for joining Left East to West with hosts Nikki Hill and Tom Parkin. We'd love to hear your comments, ratings, follows, and shares. It helps people find us. To become a Left East to West community member and to help us reach even more Canadians, subscribe using the link in the show notes. You can watch us on YouTube or listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just search for Left East to West and subscribe. I'm Doug Hamilton signing off for Left East to West. We'll see you next week.